She thought she was invisible. Just another waitress in a room full of dangerous men, blending into the background of New York's criminal underworld. She had spent 3 years running, 3 years hiding her accent, her name, and her bloodline. But one mistake changed everything. A single phone call, a lapse in judgment. When she answered in flawless, native Sicilian dialect, the room went silent. She froze, eyes locking with the man at the head of the table. Dante Rossi didn't scream. He didn't draw a weapon. He simply watched her walk out, picked up his glass, and whispered 3 words that sealed her fate. Don't let her leave. This is the story of Sienna, and the night her secrets caught up with her. The rain battered against the reinforced glass windows of the penthouse suite at the Pierre Hotel, blurring the glittering New York City skyline into a smear of gold and gray. Inside, the air was thick, smelling of expensive cigars, aged scotch, and the metallic tang of suppressed violence. Sienna Blake adjusted her black vest, keeping her eyes strictly on the tray of crystal tumblers in her hands. Her knuckles were white. Invisibility, she told herself. You are furniture. You are air. You are nobody. For 3 years, Sienna Blake had been her armor. She was just a 24-year-old struggles waitress from Ohio, with a flat American accent and a dyed blonde bob. No one looked twice at her, and that was exactly how she stayed alive. Tonight, however, the stakes felt suffocating. The agency had sent her to cover a shift for a private gathering hosted by Dante Rossi. Even the name made the hair on her arms stand up. Dante Rossi wasn't just a businessman. He was the head of the Rossi crime syndicate, a man whose influence stretched from the docks of Brooklyn to the shipping lanes of Naples. He was young for a Don, 32, with eyes the color of cold espresso and a jawline that looked like it had been carved from marble. He sat at the head of the mahogany table, his suit perfectly tailored, listening to 3 older men argue in broken English. Sienna moved silently, refilling water glasses. She knew better than to linger. The men were discussing territory, the construction contracts in Jersey. It was boring, brutal business. They are squeezing us on the concrete. One of the men, a heavy-set capo named Sal, grumbled. The union rep needs a reminder. Dante didn't speak. He just tapped his finger on the rim of his glass, a rhythmic, terrifying sound. He looked bored, but Sienna saw the way his eyes tracked everything in the room. The door, the windows, her hands as she poured the sparkling water. She finished her round and retreated to the shadows near the service entrance, her heart hammering against her ribs. She checked her watch. 20 minutes. She just had to survive 20 more minutes, and then she could clock out, disappear into the subway, and go back to her tiny, safe apartment in Queens. Then the vibration buzzed against her hip. Sienna froze. She had forgotten to silence her burner phone. It was the emergency line, the one only her grandmother, Nonna Rosa, had. Rosa was in a care home in upstate New York, suffering from dementia. If she was calling, something was wrong. Sienna glanced at the table. The men were shouting now, arguing over percentages. Dante was looking out the window, detached. She slipped the phone out of her pocket, intending to reject the call, but her thumb slipped on the screen. The line opened. Amore, dove sei? Hanno trovato la casa. Ho paura. Love, where are you? They found the house. I'm scared. Her grandmother's voice was sobbing, frantic. The code word. They found the house. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced Sienna's chest. She forgot the room. She forgot the men. She forgot she was Sienna Blake from Ohio. She pressed the phone to her ear, turning her back to the room, whispering furiously into the receiver. She didn't speak English. Instinct took over. Nonna, ascoltami bene, she hissed, her voice dropping into the distinct, rapid-fire dialect of Palermo, a sound that didn't exist in Ohio. Chiudi la porta, non aprire a nessuno, arrivo subito, stai calma, capito, muto? Grandma, listen to me well, lock the door. Don't open for anyone. I'm coming immediately. Stay calm, understand? Silence. It lasted 5 seconds. 5 seconds of pure Sicilian vernacular, spoken with the authority of someone who had grown up in the shadow of Mount Etna. She hung up, her chest heaving, her mind racing with escape plans. She needed to leave, now. She turned around to grab her tray and bolt. The room was dead silent. The shouting had stopped. The arguing over concrete and unions had vanished. Every single man at the table was staring at her. Sal looked confused. The other two looked suspicious. But Dante Rossi was looking at her as if he had never seen her before. He had swiveled his leather chair around. His elbows rested on the armrests, his fingers steeped together. His expression wasn't angry. It was something far worse. It was fascinated. Waitresses from Ohio didn't speak Palermitan dialect. They didn't use words like muto with that specific inflection. Sienna felt the blood drain from her face. She gripped the empty tray tight enough to snap the plastic. "Sorry," she squeaked, forcing her American accent back, though it sounded brittle now. "Family emergency. I have to go." She didn't wait for permission. She turned on her heel and walked towards the service door. Her legs felt like lead. "Don't run," she screamed internally. "Running makes you pray." She reached the door. She pushed it open. Behind her, the silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. She expected a shout, a gunshot, the sound of a chair scraping back. But there was nothing. Just the sound of the rain against the glass. She slipped into the corridor, the heavy door clicking shut behind her. She leaned against the wall for a fraction of a second, gasping for air. She had to get to the locker room. Change. Leave. Inside the room, Dante Rossi watched the door close. He picked up his glass of scotch, swirling the amber liquid. "Boss?" Sal asked, his voice uncertain. "That girl. That wasn't school Italian." "No," Dante said softly. His voice was a low rumble, dark and smooth. That was the dialect of the Pucheria market, and she commanded silence like a soldier, not a servant. He took a sip, his eyes narrowing. "Sal," Dante said, setting the glass down. "Yeah, boss? Don't let her leave." Sienna moved through the back corridors of the hotel with efficient speed. She didn't run. Running attracted attention. But she walked with a stride that ate up the distance. Her mind was already 3 steps ahead. Go to the locker room, grab the bag, leave the uniform, exit through the kitchen loading dock, take the C train, switch to the N, lose the tail if there is one. She reached the staff locker room. It was empty, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. She ripped open her locker, number 104, and grabbed her worn leather tote. She didn't bother changing out of her black trousers and white shirt. She just shoved her coat on. Her hands were shaking. Nonna. If they had found Nonna, that meant he had found them. Alessandro, the man she had burned to the ground to escape. She zipped her bag and turned toward the exit. "Going somewhere, Miss Blake?" The voice came from the doorway. It was calm, polite, and terrifying. Sienna froze. Standing in the frame of the locker room door was a man she recognized from the meeting. Dante's head of security. A giant of a man named Luca. He was wearing a suit that cost more than her life's earnings, and he blocked the exit completely. "My shift is over," Sienna said, channeling every ounce of indignation she could muster. "I have a family emergency. I told the manager." "The manager knows," Luca said, stepping into the room. The door clicked shut behind him. "Mr. Rossi would like a word before you go." "I don't have time for this," Sienna said, feigning the annoyance of an overworked New Yorker. She tried to sidestep him. "Look, I'm sorry I took a call on the floor. Fire me if you want. But I'm leaving." She moved to brush past him. Luca didn't grab her. He didn't have to. He simply shifted his weight, creating a wall of muscle. He held up a hand. "It wasn't a request, Signorina," he said. Sienna stopped. She assessed the situation. She knew how to fight. Her father had taught her Krav Maga and how to use a knife before she could ride a bike. But Luca was 6'4" and at least 250 pounds, and there were cameras in the hallway. Fighting here meant exposing herself completely. "Fine," she said, her voice tight. "5 minutes. Then I'm calling the police." Luca smirked, a dry, humorless twitch of his lips. "The police? Right. Follow me." He escorted her not to the lobby, but to a service elevator. He swiped a keycard. The doors opened and he gestured for her to enter. They went up, not down. Back to the penthouse. When the elevator doors opened, the main room was empty. The other men, Sal and the rest, were gone. The cigar smoke still hung in the air, blue and hazy. Dante Rossi was standing by the window, his back to her. He had taken off his suit jacket. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and ink. A tattoo of a serpent wound around his left wrist, the mark of the Rossi bloodline. "Sit," Dante said. He didn't turn around. Luca remained by the elevator, arms crossed. Sienna walked to the chair opposite the desk, but she didn't sit. She stood, gripping the strap of her bag. "I need to leave, Mr. Rossi," she said. She dropped the American accent slightly, letting a bit of the natural rasp back into her voice. It was harder to lie when you were terrified. "My grandmother is sick." Dante turned slowly. Up close, he was even more intimidating. He had a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, a small imperfection that made his face dangerously handsome. He studied her, his gaze dissecting her layer by layer. "Sienna Blake," he said, testing the name like wine. "Social Security number issued in Ohio 3 years ago. No credit history before that. No high school transcripts found in the state archives." Sienna's blood ran cold. He had run a background check in the 10 minutes it took her to get to the locker room. "I value privacy," she said. "And you value languages," Dante replied. He walked around the desk, leaning against the edge of it, invading her personal space. He smelled of sandalwood and gunpowder. "Your Italian is excellent. Where did you learn it?" "Rosetta Stone," Sienna lied. "And my grandmother is Italian." "Is she?" Dante tilted his head. "Because the dialect you used. That's not something you learn from a CD, Sienna. That was Sicilian, specifically the dialect used in the western provinces, Corleone, Palermo." He took a step closer. She refused to back down, lifting her chin. "Lots of people are from Palermo," she challenged. "True," Dante agreed softly. "But not many waitresses in New York answer the phone with the command muto. That is a word used by men who give orders, or women who are used to being obeyed." He reached out, his fingers brushing a stray lock of blonde hair away from her face. She flinched, and his hand froze. He saw the reaction, the reflex of someone who expected to be struck. His eyes darkened. "Who are you running from?" he asked. The question was unexpected. It wasn't an accusation. It was a curiosity. "I'm not running," she insisted, though her voice wavered. "I'm just a waitress." "You are a liar," Dante corrected. "And not a very good one." Suddenly her phone buzzed again in her pocket. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Dante held out his hand. "Give it to me." "No." "Sienna," he warned, his voice dropping an octave. "Give me the phone." She hesitated. If she gave it to him, he would see the caller ID. He would see the area code. He might trace it. But if she didn't, Luca was 10 feet away and ready to snap her in half. She pulled the phone out. Dante took it. He looked at the screen. It was a text message. "Nonna, they are outside the door. Sophie, help me." Dante read the name. Sophie. He looked up at her, a strange recognition flashing in his eyes. "Sophie," he whispered. "Sophie Genovese." Sienna stopped breathing. The name hung in the air, a ghost she had buried 3 years ago. The daughter of the Genovese crime family. The daughter of the man Dante Rossi had been at war with for a decade. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The fear in her eyes was confirmation enough. Dante looked at the phone, then back at her. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked calculating. He tossed the phone back to her. She fumbled to catch it. "Luca," Dante barked, his eyes never leaving Sienna's face. "Boss, Get the car and the team. We're going upstate. Sienna stared at him, bewildered. What? Dante buttoned his cuffs, his face setting into a mask of cold resolve. He walked past her, grabbing his jacket from the chair. You said they found the house, Dante said, checking the load on a handgun he pulled from a desk drawer. He slid it into his holster. If Alessandro Genovese's men are there, they will kill the old woman just to get to you, and then they will kill you. He stopped in front of her, towering over her frame. I'm not letting you leave, Sophie, he said, using her real name with a possessive weight, because you are the only leverage I have. And right now, you belong to me. You're going to help me? She asked, her voice trembling. I'm going to save your grandmother, Dante corrected, and then you and I are going to have a very long conversation about why the daughter of my enemy has been serving me drinks for the last 6 months. He opened the door. Move, he ordered. Sienna didn't argue. She ran after him. The armored black SUV tore up the Taconic State Parkway, tires hissing against the wet asphalt. Outside, the storm had turned violent, thunder cracking like artillery fire over the Hudson Valley. Inside, the silence was louder than the storm. Dante drove with one hand on the wheel, his grip relaxed but controlled. Luca sat in the passenger seat, checking a submachine gun with methodical clicks. Sienna, no, Sophie, sat in the back, her knees pulled to her chest. She stared out the window, watching the trees blur into black streaks. You're shaking, Dante said. He watched her through the rearview mirror. His eyes were dark pools, unreadable. I'm cold, she lied. She was terrified. Not of him, oddly enough, but of what was waiting at the nursing home. You're lying again, Dante countered smoothly. You're wondering if we'll get there in time. And you're wondering if I'm going to put a bullet in you once I get what I want. Sophie met his gaze in the mirror. Are you? I haven't decided, Dante said. If you are a spy sent by your father, yes, I will kill you slowly. If you are a runaway, well, that makes you valuable. I told you, she snapped, a flash of the Genovese temper flaring up. I haven't spoken to my father in 3 years. I'd rather die than go back to that house. Why? Because Alessandro isn't just a don, she whispered, looking away. He's a monster. And he promised me to a man even worse than him to seal a territory deal in Chicago. I chose poverty over slavery. Dante didn't respond, but his grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly. He accelerated, the engine roaring as they pushed past 19 miles per hour. 20 minutes later, they turned off the highway onto a gravel road. Sunnyvale Memory Care was a quiet, isolated facility, surrounded by deep woods. It was the kind of place where people put relatives they wanted to forget. Dante killed the headlights as they approached. 2 cars, Luca noted, pointing to the entrance. Sedans, idling, lights off. Genovese hit men, Sophie hissed. They're waiting for me to show up. Stay in the car, Dante ordered. He pulled a suppressed pistol from his jacket. No, Sophie said, reaching for the door handle. Nonna won't go with strangers. She'll scream. She'll fight. You need me. Dante looked back at her. He saw the fire in her eyes. It wasn't the look of a waitress. It was the look of a woman who had survived on the streets. Fine, Dante said. Stay behind me. If you run, Luca shoots you in the leg. Understood? Understood. They moved through the rain, shadows among shadows. Dante moved with lethal grace, his footsteps silent on the wet pavement. Luca flanked the right. They reached the side entrance. The glass door had been shattered. Dante signaled for silence. He stepped over the glass, gun raised. Sophie followed, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The hallway was dimly lit. They heard voices coming from room 12, Nonna's room. Where is she, old woman? Tell us where the girl is. A man's voice, rough, impatient. A slap echoed, then a whimper. Sophie saw red. Before Dante could stop her, she surged forward. Hey, she screamed, stepping into the doorway. 3 men turned. They were big, wearing cheap leather jackets. One of them had Nonna Rosa by the hair. "Sophie." The leader grinned, revealing yellow teeth. "There she is. Your father sends his regards." He raised his gun, but Dante was faster. Foot. 2 shots suppressed whispers of death. The leader dropped, a hole in his forehead. The second man scrambled for his weapon, but Luca was already there, tackling him into the wall with a bone-crunching thud. The third man, the one holding Nonna, panicked. He dragged the old woman up, putting a knife to her throat. "Back off," he screamed. "I'll cut her, I swear." Dante froze. He had a clear shot, but the risk was too high. The man was using Nonna as a human shield. "Easy," Dante said, his voice calm, hypnotic. He lowered his gun slightly. "Let her go. You walk away." "Liar," the man spat. "You're Rossi. You don't let anyone walk away." The man's eyes darted to Dante, just for a split second. It was enough. Sophie didn't think. She grabbed a heavy ceramic vase from the bedside table and hurled it with the precision of a shortstop. It smashed into the man's face, shattering on impact. He screamed, blinding by the ceramic shards and blood. Dropping the knife, Sophie lunged. She didn't go for Nonna. She went for the man. She kicked his knee, hearing it snap. And as he fell, she picked up his fallen knife and pressed the blade against his jugular. "Don't move," she snarled in Italian, "or I open you up like a fish." The room went silent. Dante watched her. She was soaked, her hair plastered to her face, her chest heaving. She held the knife with a steady hand. She looked magnificent, terrifying. "Sophie?" Nonna Rosa whimpered from the bed. Sophie's expression softened instantly. She dropped the knife and rushed to her grandmother, embracing the trembling old woman. "It's okay, Nonna. I'm here. I'm here." Dante holstered his weapon. He looked at the man on the floor, then at Luca. "Clean this up," Dante said. "Burn the cars. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong." He walked over to Sophie. She looked up at him, defiance returning to her eyes. "We need to go," Dante said. "More will come." "Where?" Sophie asked. Dante extended a hand to help her up. For the first time, he didn't look at her like a piece of leverage. He looked at her like an equal. "Home," he said. The drive back was different. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a heavy exhaustion in the car. Nonna Rosa had fallen asleep in the back seat, her head resting on Sophie's lap. Sophie stroked her grandmother's silver hair, her eyes heavy. She watched Dante. He drove with the same focused intensity, but the tension in his shoulders had lessened. They didn't go back to the city. They drove north, deep into the forested hills of the Catskills. After an hour, they arrived at a massive wrought iron gate. It groaned open, revealing a sprawling stone estate that looked more like a fortress than a home. "The Iron Manor," Dante said quietly. "My private residence. No one knows about this place except Luca and my inner circle. Not even the Genovese spies." They pulled into the garage. Servants were waiting, silent, efficient men and women who whisked Nonna away to a prepared guest suite with a medical team on standby. "She will be safe," Dante said, seeing Sophie's hesitation. "My doctor is the best. He will tend to her bruises." "And me?" Sophie asked. "What happens to me?" "You come with me," Dante said. He led her through the house. It was beautiful but cold. High ceilings, stone floors, modern art that looked like jagged wounds on the walls. It lacked warmth. It lacked life. He brought her to a study on the second floor. A fire was crackling in the hearth. He poured 2 glasses of brandy and handed her one. "Drink," he ordered. "It helps with the shock." Sophie took the glass. Her hands were still trembling slightly. She took a sip. The liquid burned pleasantly down her throat. "So," Dante said, leaning against his mahogany desk, "Sophie Genovese, presumed dead 3 years ago. The underworld thought you drowned in a boating accident in Sicily." "I staged it," she admitted. "I left my shoes on the pier. I took a ferry to Naples, then a cargo ship to Jersey." "Resourceful," Dante murmured. Why the waitress gig? With your skills, you could have been a high-end translator or a corporate spy. Because I wanted to be invisible, Sophie said, walking towards the fire. Waitresses are invisible. No one looks at the help. I looked, Dante said. The words hung in the air. He hadn't meant to say them, but it was true. Even before the phone call, he had noticed the way she moved. Graceful. Too graceful for carrying trays. You hate my father, Sophie stated. It wasn't a question. Hate is too soft a word, Dante replied, his voice hardening. Alessandro Genovese killed my younger brother 5 years ago. He sent a car bomb. My brother was 19. He wasn't even in the life. Sophie turned to him, her eyes wide. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. Your father paints himself as a saint. Dante took a step toward her. I swore I would burn the Genovese name to ash. I swore I would take everything from him. He was close now, too close. Sophie could feel the heat radiating from him. She should be scared. She was in the house of her family's mortal enemy. But she didn't feel fear. She felt a strange, magnetic pull. So I am your pawn, Sophie said quietly. You'll use me to draw him out. That was the plan, Dante admitted. He looked down at her. She was small compared to him, but she stood her ground. He saw the bruise forming on her arm, where she had fought the hitman. And now? She asked. Dante reached out. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. His skin was rough, calloused from years of violence, but his touch was surprisingly gentle. Now, Dante whispered, his voice rough with conflict. I find that I don't want to use you. I want to keep you. Sophie's breath hitched. As a prisoner? No, Dante said, as a partner. He stepped back, breaking the spell. He walked to the window, looking out at the dark grounds of his estate. Your father knows you are alive now. The men at the nursing home will have reported back before they died. He is coming for you, Sophie. He won't stop until he drags you back to that marriage contract. He turned back to her, his face grim. You have 2 choices. 1, I give you a car, some money, and you run again. You spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, waiting for a bullet. Sophie shivered. She was tired of running. 3 years of looking at every shadow, flinching at every loud noise. Or, she asked. 2, Dante said. You stay here. You marry me. Sophie dropped her glass. It shattered on the stone hearth, shards of crystal scattering like diamonds. What? She gasped. A marriage of convenience, Dante said quickly, his eyes intense. If you are my wife, you are a Rossi. By Mafia law, your father cannot touch you without declaring all-out war on the 5 families. It grants you immunity. It grants you protection. And what does it grant you? Sophie asked, narrowing her eyes. Legitimacy, Dante said. And the ultimate revenge. Imagine Alessandro's face when he realizes his daughter belongs to his greatest enemy. Belongs, Sophie bristled. I don't belong to anyone. Figure of speech, Dante said, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. But think about it. You get safety for you and your grandmother. I get my revenge. It's a business deal. Sophie looked at him. He was dangerous, yes, but he had saved Nonna. He had killed for her. And in his eyes, she saw something she had never seen in her father's eyes. Respect. But marriage. To the devil of New York. I need time, she said. You have until morning, Dante replied, because by noon tomorrow, your father's army will be hunting you, and I need to know if I'm protecting a stranger. Or my wife. He walked to the door. Sleep well, Sophie. He left her alone in the room with the fire and the shattered glass. Sophie sank into the leather armchair. Her mind was spinning. Marry him. It was madness. It was suicide. But as she remembered the way he had stood in front of her at the nursing home, shielding her body with his own, she realized something terrifying. She trusted him, and that was more dangerous than any gun. The morning sun bled through the heavy velvet curtains of the Iron Manor, casting long, sharp shadows across the floor of the guest suite. Sophie hadn't slept. She had spent the night watching the embers of the fire die out, weighing her life in the balance. Running meant freedom, but it was the freedom of a hunted animal. Staying meant a cage, but it was a cage made of gold and steel, guarded by a man who looked at her as if she were the only woman in the world. When the heavy oak door creaked open at 8 a.m., she was already dressed. She wore the same black trousers and white shirt from her waitress shift, washed and dried by the staff, but she stood with the posture of a Genovese. Dante entered. He looked fresh, shaven, wearing a charcoal three-piece suit that made his shoulders look impossibly broad. He held a garment bag in one hand and a small velvet box in the other. "Have you decided?" he asked. "Oh, pleasantries. No, good morning. Just the business at hand." Sophie looked at him. "If I do this," she said, her voice steady, "I'm not your subordinate. I'm your partner. You don't order me around, you ask." Dante's lips quirked upward. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was approval. "Agreed. And Nonna stays here, with 24-hour protection, regardless of what happens to me." "Done," Dante said. He hung the garment bag on the wardrobe door. "Get dressed, the judge is downstairs. We don't have time for a church." Though. Sophie unzipped the bag. Inside was a dress, not white, but a deep, blood-red silk. It was elegant, modest, but fitted. A statement piece. "Red?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "White is for innocence," Dante said, his voice dropping low as he stepped closer. "You and I both know there is no innocence left in this room, Sophie. Red is for war, and today we declare war." He placed the velvet box on the table and left her to change. When she came downstairs 30 minutes later, the great hall was transformed. Luca stood by the fireplace, looking uncomfortable in a tie, serving as the witness. An elderly judge, shaking slightly, stood with the Bible. Dante watched her descend the stairs. For a moment, his mask slipped. The cold calculation in his eyes was replaced by raw, unadulterated hunger. The red silk clung to her curves, and with her hair pulled back, exposing the elegant line of her neck, she looked every inch the Mafia queen she was born to be. The ceremony was brief, cold, efficient. "I, Dante, take thee, Sophie. I, Sophie, take thee, Dante." When it came time for the rings, Dante opened the box. Inside was a massive diamond, set in black platinum. It was heavy, ancient-looking. "This belonged to my mother," Dante whispered as he slid it onto her finger. His hand was warm, his grip firm. "She died defending this family. Wear it, and you are under my protection. Forever." Sophie felt a shiver run down her spine. "Forever is a long time, Dante." "In our world," he replied, looking into her eyes, "forever is usually just until the bullet hits. Let's hope we beat the odds." He kissed her. It was supposed to be for show, for the judge, for the witnesses. But when his lips touched hers, something sparked. It wasn't gentle. It was possessive. Dante kissed her like he was branding her, his hand tangling in her hair, pulling her flush against his hard chest. Sophie gasped, her hands instinctively clutching his lapels. For a terrifying second, she forgot it was a deal. She forgot the danger. She just felt him. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark, his pupils blown wide. He didn't say a word. He just turned to the judge. "File the papers. Make sure the press knows by noon." By 1 p.m., the news had shattered the fragile peace of New York's underworld. The New York Times ran a small blurb in the society section, but the real news traveled via encrypted messages and hushed phone calls in the back of Italian restaurants. Dante Rossi is married, and to not just anyone. He married the ghost, the dead daughter of Alessandro Genovese. Sophie sat in Dante's study, watching the news feed on a tablet. Her phone, her old burner, had been destroyed, replaced by a secure line. It rang at 2 p.m. Dante, sitting behind his desk cleaning a semi-automatic pistol, looked up, answered it, put it on speaker. Sophie picked it up, Her hands shook just once before she steeled herself. "Hello? Whore." The voice was unmistakable. Gravel and hate. Her father. Sophie felt the old fear claw at her throat, but she looked at Dante. He was watching her, his expression calm, anchoring her. "Hello, Papa," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I thought you'd be happy. I finally found a husband. Wealthy, influential. Just like you wanted. You are dead," Alessandro hissed. "You think Rossi can protect you? He is a boy. I will burn his house down with you inside it. I will peel the skin from your grandmother's." Dante reached over and took the phone from Sophie's hand. "Alessandro," Dante said, his voice like grinding stones. Silence on the other end, then heavy breathing. "Listen closely," Dante said. "Sophie is a Rossi now. She is blood of my blood. You touch her, you touch me. You threaten her grandmother again, and I won't just kill you. I will dismantle everything you built, brick by brick, while you watch. Do you understand?" "I will see you at the gala on Friday, Dante," Alessandro spat. "Bring the girl. Let's see if she can wear the crown." The line went dead. Dante set the phone down. The room was silent. "The gala?" Sophie asked, her voice barely a whisper. "The governor's ball?" "Yes," Dante said. He stood up, holstering his weapon. "It's neutral ground. Every major crime family in the tri-state area will be there under the guise of legitimate business. If we don't go, we look weak. If we hide, they will hunt us." He walked around the desk and stopped in front of her. He reached out, tilting her chin up, so she had to look at him. "We go," Dante said, "and we show them that the Genovese daughter isn't a victim anymore. She's the queen." "I don't know if I can do it," Sophie admitted, the facade cracking, facing him. "In person." "You won't be facing him alone," Dante said softly. "You have me. And I don't lose." The governor's ball was held at the Plaza Hotel, a venue of crystal chandeliers, flowing champagne, and smiles that hid knives. The air smelled of expensive perfume and treachery. Sophie wore black this time, a floor-length gown with a slit up the thigh and a back completely open. It was daring, dangerous. Around her neck hung a diamond choker that cost more than the restaurant she used to work in. Dante was a shadow at her side, his tuxedo impeccable, his eyes scanning every face, every waiter, every exit. His hand rested on the small of her back, a constant, burning point of contact. "Breathe," he whispered in her ear as they stepped out of the elevator. "Head high, you own this room." As they entered the ballroom, the conversation died. 300 heads turned. The silence was absolute. It was the same silence from the restaurant, but magnified. Sophie felt the weight of the stares. Curiosity, malice, lust, fear. She found Dante's eyes in the reflection of a mirror. He gave her a subtle nod. "Showtime." They moved through the crowd. Couples from other families nodded respectfully to Dante, their eyes lingering on Sophie with confusion and wariness. Then the crowd parted. Alessandro Genovese stood near the orchestra pit. He was older than Sophie remembered, his hair completely white, his face a roadmap of cruelty. He was surrounded by 4 bodyguards. "Dante," Alessandro said, opening his arms in a mock gesture of welcome. "And my beloved daughter." Resurrected from the sea, Sophie's heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced a smile that was all teeth. "The sea didn't want me, Papa. It spat me back out." "A pity," Alessandro sneered. He took a step closer. "You look like your mother. She was weak, too." Dante stepped in, smoothly cutting off Alessandro's advance. "Careful, Alessandro. You're speaking to my wife." "Your wife?" Alessandro laughed, a dry, hacking sound. "A thief and a runaway. You think a ring changes what she is?" "She is a Genovese. Betrayal is in her blood. She will stick a knife in your back the moment you sleep, Dante. Just ask her how she left me." "I left because you are a monster," Sophie said, her voice ringing clear over the hushed crowd. "And Dante is 10 times the man you will ever be." Alessandro's face turned purple. His hand twitched toward his jacket. Suddenly the lights cut out. Pitch blackness swallowed the ballroom. Screams erupted. "Get down!" Dante roared, shoving Sophie to the floor. Pop, 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 pop. Muzzle flashes illuminated the dark like strobe lights. Gunfire erupted from the balcony above. It wasn't a hit. It was a massacre. Alessandro hadn't come to talk. He had broken the truce of neutral ground. "Luca!" Dante screamed into his comms. "Exit B, now!" Dante grabbed Sophie's hand, dragging her into a crouch. They scrambled through the chaos of fleeing guests and overturned tables. Glass shattered everywhere. "He's crazy." Sophie screamed over the noise. "He'll kill everyone. He doesn't care." Dante fired 3 shots blindly toward the balcony to suppress the shooters. "Move!" They reached the service corridor, but the door was locked. Dante kicked it, but it held. "Trap!" he snarled. From the shadows of the kitchen entrance to their left, a figure emerged. It wasn't Alessandro. It was Sal, the capo from the first night, the man who had argued about concrete. He held a silenced pistol pointed directly at Dante's chest. "Sorry, boss," Sal said, his face sweating. "Genovese offered me the Bronx. You know how it is. Nothing personal." Dante froze. He was out of ammo. He had spent his clip suppressing the balcony. "Sal," Dante said, his voice deadly calm. "Put it down." "Can't do that," Sal said. He tightened his finger on the trigger. Sophie didn't think. She didn't have a weapon. But she had her bag. And inside her bag, she had a heavy metal compact mirror and a canister of pepper spray she had carried for 3 years as a waitress. As Sal's eyes flickered to Dante, Sophie lunged. She didn't go for the gun. She sprayed the pepper stream directly into Sal's eyes. "Ah!" Sal screamed, blinding, firing the gun. The bullet went wide, shattering a vase. Dante moved like a viper. He closed the distance, grabbed Sal's wrist, and twisted it with a sickening crunch. The gun fell. Dante swept Sal's legs, sending the traitor crashing to the floor. Dante didn't hesitate. He picked up the dropped gun and put 2 bullets in Sal's chest. "Let's go," Dante said, grabbing Sophie again. But as they turned to run, the kitchen doors burst open. Alessandro stood there, a revolver in his hand. Touching scene. He sneered. He raised the gun, aiming at Sophie. "No!" Dante shouted. He threw himself in front of her, just as Alessandro fired. The impact knocked Dante backward. He hit the wall and slid down, clutching his abdomen. Blood, dark and fast, began to soak his white shirt. "Dante!" Sophie screamed. She dropped to her knees beside him, pressing her hands against the wound. Alessandro walked closer, smiling. He cocked the hammer for a second shot. "Goodbye, daughter." Sophie looked up. Her eyes were filled with tears. But behind the tears, there was a rage that eclipsed everything else. She saw Dante's gun lying on the floor, just inches from her hand. Alessandro was looking at her face, savoring her fear. He wasn't looking at her hands. Waitress, she thought. Invisible. "Please, Papa," she sobbed, feigning total surrender. "Please don't." "Begging suits you," Alessandro mocked. Sophie grabbed the gun. She didn't fumble. She didn't shake. She raised it and fired in one fluid motion, just like her father had taught her when she was 12, before he became a monster. The bullet caught Alessandro in the throat. He gurgled, dropping his weapon, clutching his neck as he fell to his knees. He looked at her with shock, realizing too late that he hadn't raised a victim. He had raised a killer. Sophie stood up, walking over to him. She looked down at the man who had haunted her nightmares. "I'm not a Genovese," she whispered. "I'm a Rossi." Alessandro collapsed. He was gone. Sophie spun around. "Dante?" She fell back to his side. He was pale, his breathing shallow. He looked at her, his eyes unfocused. "Did you—" He coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Did you get him?" "He's dead," Sophie cried, ripping the hem of her dress to make a bandage. "Stay with me, Dante. Stay with me." "You stayed," he whispered, a faint smile touching his lips. "You didn't run." "I told you," she said, pressing hard on the wound as sirens wailed in the distance. "I'm your partner." Dante's eyes rolled back. His head lolled against her shoulder. Dante, no, wake up. The ballroom doors burst open. Luca and the security team stormed in. Medic, Sophie screamed, her voice breaking, echoing off the blood-spattered walls. Get a medic now. The silence of the intensive care unit was a different kind of violence. It wasn't the loud, chaotic violence of the ballroom, with its shattering glass and screaming guests. It was a cold, sterile violence, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, the hiss of a ventilator, and the terrifying possibility that the man in the bed might never open his eyes again. Dante Rossi had been in a coma for 12 days. Sophie sat in the high-backed leather chair in the corner of the private suite at Mount Sinai. She wasn't wearing the blood-stained red dress anymore. She was wearing a black tailored suit, sharp and severe. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a tight chignon. She looked less like a wife holding a vigil and more like a sentinel guarding a fortress. Luca stood by the door, his arm in a sling from a graze wound he'd taken during the extraction. He looked tired, his eyes shadowed. "Signora Rossi," Luca said, his voice low. "The captains are downstairs, in the cafeteria. They're getting restless. They want to know if there is a plan." Sophie looked up from the tablet she was holding. Her eyes were dry. She hadn't cried since the night of the gala. Tears were a luxury she couldn't afford. "They don't want a plan, Luca," Sophie said, her voice steady. "They want to know if the crown is up for grabs. They smell blood in the water." "Vinny the butcher from Brooklyn is talking loud," Luca warned. "He says a family can't be run by a ghost and a woman." Sophie stood up. She walked to the bed and looked down at Dante. He was pale, a stark contrast to the dark sheets. Wires snaked from his chest. He looked vulnerable for the first time since she'd met him. But even in this state, his hand, resting on top of the blanket, looked strong. She placed her hand over his for a brief second. "Don't you dare die on me, Dante," she thought. "I didn't survive my father just to lose you." She turned to Luca. "Bring them up." Luca blinked. "Here? To the ICU?" "No," Sophie said, checking her reflection in the window. "To the conference room on the 4th floor. Tell them Mrs. Rossi is calling the meeting to order." The conference room was cold, the air conditioning humming loudly. 6 men sat around the oval table. These were the capos, the street bosses who controlled the Rossi empire. They were rough men, scarred and cynical. When Sophie walked in, the conversation stopped abruptly. Vinny, a massive man with a thick neck and a thicker accent, didn't even stand up. He leaned back in his chair, picking his teeth with a toothpick. "So," Vinny grunted, "the waitress is here. Where's Luca? We need to talk about territory. The Genovese crew is scattering, and we need to grab the Bronx before the Irish do." Sophie didn't sit. She walked to the head of the table, Dante's seat. She placed her hands on the polished wood and leaned forward. "The Bronx is already secured," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried the same icy authority Dante used. "I sent a team 2 nights ago to seize Alessandro's ledger books. We know where their money is. We don't need to fight for the streets. We own their bank accounts." Vinny laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. "You sent a team? You? Listen, sweetheart, you're a pretty face, and you got guts for saving the boss, but you don't give orders. You go back upstairs and hold Dante's hand. Men are talking." The room went deadly silent. The other capos looked down, uncomfortable. Sophie didn't flinch. She walked slowly around the table until she stood directly behind Vinny. "You think I'm just a waitress," she whispered. "You think I'm just a wife." She leaned down, her lips close to his ear. "Skinnu Vinny," she murmured in the thick, rapid dialect of Palermo. The language of the old country, the language of the Vucceria market, where deals were made in blood. "Did you know that Alessandro Genovese looked me in the eye before he died? He thought I was weak too. He thought he could pull the trigger." She straightened up, her voice hardening into steel. "I put a bullet in my own father's throat to protect this family. I washed the blood off my hands and secured our assets, while you were down here drinking vending machine coffee and complaining." She signaled to Luca, who was standing by the door. He stepped forward, tossing a thick file onto the table. It slid across and hit Vinny's chest. "That," Sophie said, "is the transfer of the Genovese shipping contracts to the Rossi firm. Signed, sealed, and witnessed by the union head this morning. I handled it." She looked around the room, meeting every man's gaze. One by one, they looked away. They saw it now. It wasn't just Dante's wife standing there. It was the daughter of the Genovese, raised by wolves who had just eaten the alpha. "Now," Sophie said, returning to the head of the table, "Dante is resting. Until he wakes up, my word is his word. If anyone has a problem with that, you can join Alessandro in the ground. Are we clear?" Vinny looked at the file. Then he looked at Sophie. He swallowed hard, the toothpick falling from his mouth. He stood up slowly, buttoning his jacket. "Crystal clear, Donna Rossi," Vinny muttered, bowing his head slightly. "Good," Sophie said. "Now get out. I have a husband to attend to." It was 3 days later when the change happened. It was raining again, just like the night they met. Sophie was dozing in the chair, a book resting on her chest. "Sophie." The sound was barely a whisper, ragged and dry like sandpaper. Sophie jerked awake. The book fell to the floor. She rushed to the bedside. Dante's eyes were open. They were hazy, unfocused, but they were open. "Dante?" She fumbled for the water cup, bringing the straw to his lips. "Drink." Slowly. He took a few sips, wincing as he swallowed. He tried to shift, but a groan of pain escaped his lips. "Don't move," she ordered gently, brushing the hair back from his forehead. "You took a bullet to the abdomen. They had to remove part of your spleen. You've been out for 2 weeks." Dante blinked, processing the information. His gaze cleared, locking onto her face. He saw the dark circles under her eyes, the exhaustion etched into her features. "Alessandro," he rasped. "Dead," Sophie said simply. "I killed him." Dante let out a breath that might have been a laugh if it didn't hurt so much. "I remember. You were magnificent." "I was terrified," she corrected. "But I did what I had to do." "And the family?" Dante asked, the boss in him fighting through the morphine. "Is there anything left?" Sophie smirked. It was a tired smile, but a genuine one. "The family is fine." Vinny tried to make a move. "I put him in his place. The Genovese assets are ours. The commission has recognized the transfer of power." Dante stared at her for a long time. The silence stretched, filled only by the rain against the window. He looked at her, not with gratitude, but with something deeper. Awe. He reached out, his hand trembling. Sophie took it immediately, intertwining their fingers. "I offered you a way out," Dante whispered. "That night at the manor, I gave you a car. Money. You could be in Paris right now, or Bali. Instead, you're in a hospital in Queens, wiping the brow of a man who almost got you killed." "I didn't want Paris," Sophie said softly. "I wanted a home, and strange as it is, I found one." "With a monster?" Dante asked, his thumb stroking her knuckles. "You're not a monster, Dante. You're just a man who lives in the dark," Sophie said. She leaned down, resting her forehead against his. "And I've lived in the dark my whole life. At least with you, I'm not alone in it." Dante closed his eyes, soaking in her presence. "When I get out of here," he murmured, "we are going to have a real wedding. No judges, no quick signatures. A real one. I want the world to see. A real wedding means a real honeymoon." Sophie teased, tears finally pricking her eyes. "Italy," Dante promised. "We'll go to Sicily, to the old country. We'll walk through the Vacceria market, and you can yell at the fishmongers in your dialect, and I'll just watch you and think about how lucky I am." "Rest now," she whispered, kissing his forehead. "Sophie." "Yes." "Don't let go." "Never," she vowed. 6 months later. The terrace of the Villa Igea in Palermo overlooked the Tyrrhenian Sea. The water was a brilliant, sparkling turquoise. Sophie stood at the railing, holding a glass of Prosecco. The warm Sicilian breeze played with the hem of her white sundress. She looked different. The sharpness of New York had softened here, replaced by a golden glow. Thinking about escaping? Dante came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. He looked healthy, the color back in his face, though he moved with a slight stiffness on cold days. He rested his chin on her shoulder. "I was thinking about the phone call," Sophie admitted, leaning back into him. "If Nonna hadn't called, if I hadn't answered in Italian, I would have let you walk out the door," Dante said, "and I would have spent the rest of my life wondering why the blonde waitress had such sad eyes, and I would be serving coffee in Ohio." She laughed. "Instead," Dante said, turning her around to face him, "you are the Queen of New York." "I prefer Sophie," she smiled. "You are both," Dante said. He kissed her, deep and slow, with the taste of salt and wine on his lips. "But most importantly, you are mine." "And you are mine, Dante Rossi." The sun began to set, casting the ocean in hues of orange and purple. Below them, the city of Palermo bustled with life, noisy, chaotic, dangerous, and beautiful. But up here, high above the world, there was only peace. Sophie smiled. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was seen. She was loved. And for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she belonged. And that brings us to the end of Sophie and Dante's story. From a terrified waitress hiding in the shadows to the woman who brought the underworld to its knees, Sophie proved that true strength isn't about physical power. It's about loyalty, intelligence, and the courage to stand your ground when everyone else runs away. She saved Dante. But in the end, they really saved each other. If you loved this Mafia romance saga, please give this video a big thumbs up. It really helps support the channel. And I want to know, do you think Vinny will stay loyal to Sophie? Or will there be trouble down the road? Let me know your theories in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're the first to hear our next dramatic story. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.